So this one is sort of a recap on just briefly of the first three, and then we'll touch on waiver services as well. All right, so in this one, like I said, we're kind of wrapping it all together. In the first Lunch and Learn, we talked about the DDDA, which is the Developmental Disability Determination Application. The second one was about the DDRR, which is the Developmental Disability Registry and Review. And then in the third one, we talked about the Medicaid system, applying for it, Social Security, getting tips and tricks to that, and some handouts. And now we're going to talk about the waiver overview, the services that come along with the different waivers that the state of Alaska has. All right, so in this handout, we have this process for enrolling on the intellectual and developmental disability waivers, or the IDD waivers. Excuse me. So these first two steps here, this is where we may have done a PCI with somebody, just depending on what's going on, if we're not entirely certain which route we want to go, just for better ideas for services in the community, as well as which waiver path to go. The second step here, we have the application for developmental disability eligibility. So that's that DDDA form. And then in steps 3 through 6 is where Stone Soup is really gonna help guide families. So in these ones, once we hear back whether somebody is eligible or not, is going to determine how we move forward. We either may go back to this step and try and figure out why they were denied, if we need to gather more documents or anything like that. If they were approved, we can go on to the DDRR. And that's a form where we're going to answer some questions and go more into depth on how someone's disability or disabilities is impacting them, their home life, and their community life. And then the state will come back with a score, and that puts them on the registry. And that kind of gives us an idea how long they may wait for, how likely they might be to be pulled for a waiver when the state does a pull for the different waivers. And then if they are selected for a waiver, one of the two that we can apply for, our next step is to help connect them with a care coordinator who handles those waivers specifically. At that point, we'll do sort of we'll help them figure out a list of those who may have current openings. We may be able to help with gathering a list of other care coordinators, maybe making some phone calls. But then at that point, the care coordinator is going to take the process and run with it from there. So like I said in that last slide, we have different letters that we might get from the state as far as eligibility. And this one we see that it just says that they were approved. So in this case, we don't necessarily have to worry about renewing DD eligibility. They should be set for life on the eligibility side. And then on this one, we see that they have approval until age 8. And so if we have an approval letter like this, we know that on the date that is hidden here by the redaction, we'll want to get together with this family and resubmit the eligibility documents to make sure that they're still eligible for the waiver programs should they get pulled for a waiver. And then in this one was a denial. So this one goes into detail here about what the state is looking for. They explain what was submitted to apply for eligibility. And then they will go into detail on the different areas and kind of what they saw, where a person may have been eligible, or maybe where eligibility didn't quite reach the level that it needs to be approved. And then near the bottom here, it will give you some time to submit additional documentation if we have it, to try and push for an approval if possible. And then if you want to, you can also request a manager's review. Oh, that's the paragraph right here, sorry. This is a sample DDRR score letter. So essentially, once we're at this stage, we know that somebody is on the registry. They're waiting to get pulled for the ISW or IDD waiver. And this will tell us the score that they got based on the answers that were submitted. And then it will also tell you what they're doing when they go to pull. They're looking at the highest scores first. And then what to do once you're drawn. And then what to do to maintain active status on the registry. So this one, the questions that got us to this stage are ones that we have to renew yearly to maintain your spot on the registry. And that leads into this letter here. So sometimes the state will send out this letter saying, hey, it's been a year. We need to get a new DDRR form questions answered, submitted. This will tell us, it'll have all the person's identifying info. And then it will tell us it's time to provide updated information. And that if we're not interested in continuing to wait for the ISW or IDD waivers, and the needs are being met aside from the waiver program, we can disregard and they'll just come off the registry automatically. And we can always get somebody back on the registry by completing those questions again in the future, should the level of care go back up to a higher level than what's being met at that time. And then the eligibility may or may not need to be redone, just depending on that first letter that was received. And it's not going to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so this one is if somebody already has the ISW. So we can apply for the ISW waiver and the IDD, and we'll almost always choose to apply for both at the same time when we're working with a family, either for the first round or if we're renewing the DDRR on a year and they haven't been pulled for the ISW yet. If they have the ISW and they get this letter, so this one is basically saying, if you have the ISW already, it's time to renew those questions to stay on the registry if you need the higher level of care that the IDD can provide. However, if the ISW is meeting a person's needs, you can disregard this one as well, and they'll come off the registry, not to be pulled for the IDD, but they'll maintain the ISW waiver services. And then leading into the Medicaid waiver services, there is a Medicaid waiver brochure that I have in here that talks about all the different services that the state provides through the waivers. And so the Medicaid waiver programs allow individuals with physical and developmental disabilities to receive services while remaining in their homes and communities rather than in an institutional setting. And then sometimes I like to send this out. It's just the waiver brochure, and it'll tell you the 5 different Medicaid waivers that are available. It gives you the definition or the acronym breakdown, as well as the different services and the definitions of them. And then you have your check boxes over here to tell you which of the 5 waivers offers which of the services down the side there. So on the first one, we have care coordination. This is a person-centered activity where a care coordinator will assess your needs and then help you connect with the resources to meet those needs. And this is a requirement for each waiver. And then we have in-home supports, and this is for from birth to 18 years old. It may include assistance with activities of daily living, or ADLs, and instrumental activities of daily living, IADLs. Examples are eating, bathing, grooming, dressing, using the restroom, or taking medication, shopping for groceries, laundry, and housekeeping. And for this one, a person must live full-time with an unpaid caregiver. And then we have family habilitation or family hab, assistance with ADLs and social skills while living full-time in a licensed home of a paid caregiver. And then we have group home services, services for those who are 18 and older, assistance with ADLs and social skills while living full-time in a licensed assisted living home. Supported living, services for those 18 and older, assistance with ADLs while still living full-time in their own residence. And then residential supported living, assistance with ADLs for those that live full-time in a licensed assisted living home. And then we have day hab or day habilitation.
So you see the age range, it starts at age 3. And these are going to be recreational activities outside of the home. And it's really goal-based activities that they want to encourage social or independent living skills. So it can be either delivered individually, so one-on-one, the individual with the direct support provider, or in a group.
So the second one there is adult day services, and this is adult care in a group atmosphere. On the next one, we have respite care. This is a service designed to give unpaid caregivers a break. So for a lot of families, if we're working with those who have minors, those with young adult or adult applicants, we're looking at being able to get the person somewhere with a care provider so that the family has a chance to maybe do errands or anything else really that they don't normally have a chance to do on their own. And then supported employment for the applicant. So it covers training, support, services to obtain needed job skills, and then gain employment also. And it can include job coaching, mentors, and other services. For transportation and escort services, this is rides to access resources within the community and to various other activities. And so this one, what I've seen is that it can be above and beyond what Medicaid transportation allows for. And in that one, you have to have a guardian with a minor. It's usually just to and from medical appointments, whereas this one is for almost any other transportation need. And if it's with minors, if it's set up ahead of time, should be able to be done without having to have like the parent or guardian present. And then it also covers environmental modifications. So any needed modifications to the home, vehicles such as ramps, lifts, accessible showers, other things within, around the home or vehicle that can make a person's mobility more easily taken care of independently. Now on the waiver brochure, chore services isn't necessarily provided through the waivers. This one can be done through what's called the Community First Choice or CFC program. And that's something that we can determine if there's a need or potential eligibility for through the PCI, one of those first steps. And then can also be accessed through the Division of Behavioral Health with their autism services, and through agencies like Denali Family Services, Alaska Child and Family. Meal services on here as well. Service for those 18 and older can cover ready to eat meals, and then meals that are delivered to the home or served in a group setting. They can also cover specialized medical equipment and supplies and assistive technology devices to help consumers increase their ability to perform ADLs. Examples can be hospital beds, wheelchairs, back and leg braces, oxygen, feeding tubes, etc. Nursing oversight is a service that can be provided, and this is where a registered nurse is going to help ensure that the necessary medical care is safely delivered to the applicant. There's also intensive active treatment. This is professional level treatment and or therapy designed to stop specific behaviors from reoccurring. Can be personal, social, a mental health, or substance abuse problem. For the intensive active treatment, this one is now offered to adults, but for those who are minors is an accessible service through the Division of Behavioral Health. These waivers can also cover specialized private duty nursing. This is nursing services for ages 21 plus, and they are specific to the needs of the applicant. And that is the end of the brochure services.
That was a really thorough presentation, Dan. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, happy to answer any questions that you guys have. There was a couple of things, Dan, if I could just, add to your presentation. So sometimes when we think about some of the services, especially as we're explaining them to a family member, they're just looking for help, right? So we talk about assistance, like assistance with ADLs. One of the things that's important to kind of distinguish is that a lot of the services, especially those that are provided for folks on the IDD or the ISW waiver, are habilitative. So I know you've mentioned that for a couple of them, like family home habilitation, day habilitation, it's right there in the title. But then even things like what's now supported employment and is going to become just employment services, that's also habilitative. In-home supports and supported living is also habilitative. So really, the intent of those services is not just to do for the individual, like personal care, that's really a service to come in and help the person do something, help them bathe, help them eat. The distinguishing, difference is that with the habilitative services, really the goal is to assist the person to gain independence. So that's just kind of an important thing to talk about when you're talking with families about what services are available on those waivers. And then you had one portion about the specialized medical equipment. This is one that's often really confusing for people. So if folks have Medicaid, there's a lot of things that are covered under regular Medicaid, like wheelchairs would be something that would be covered under regular Medicaid. But then there are certain things that would be covered under the waiver under specialized medical equipment, like wheelchair repairs and van lift repairs and things like that. So it gets a little bit specific, and we have a chart on our website when it is up and working that you can pull off, and I can send you guys a copy too, that's has the specific things that are covered under specialized medical equipment. I think at the DDRC level, you probably don't get into that level of detail with folks, but it might be something that you could kind of help them explore. If they already have Medicaid, there could be things that they're needing that Medicaid could meet that need instead of waiting for a waiver, if that makes any sense.
Heather, that was a great addition. This is Lisa. When, just to kind of piggyback off of what you're talking about, when we first sit down, we're meeting with the family or an individual, that person-centered intake is really going to let us know, like Dan was saying, what avenue do we need to explore for a waiver, if we can, or is there community-based resources, services that could help benefit them? Because as we know, or if you don't know, we will let you know that this process could take quite a while. So we want to bridge that gap, so to speak. So if there's anything through Medicaid, or if the family or the individual needs to get connected to Medicaid, we want to explore all of those first steps first. If we're looking at things that can be supported through Medicaid, TEFRA, or even in the interim, if they don't have that and they have their private insurance, then we definitely want to explore all of that first. Could you speak, Heather, to the part of, let's say once an individual has been drawn or selected for a waiver, they get that letter and we're all, woohoo, right on. We're going to do a warm handoff to a care coordinator. Can you kind of explain what that looks like once we have connected an individual or a family to a care coordinator?
Yeah, so the first thing they have to do is they have to get their application in. So we send them the notice to proceed letter, and then they have to obviously tell us what care coordinator they're working with. And then they have their timeline to get their application in to be assessed. The biggest thing that usually holds people up is one, finding a care coordinator that will take them on their caseload. I mean, we know that that's a reality in the state of Alaska. We have a shortage of care coordinators. And so that sometimes can be a big hiccup, but really the biggest thing we run into is documentation. So the best thing you guys can do is help the family be organized to have that documentation in place or, you know, readily available so that they can share that with the care coordinator. And I imagine you guys do a lot of that too. You probably share those documents, help them share those, but it's at that point that they submit an application that the first thing we have to do is determine whether or not they have a qualifying diagnosis. And that can be very easy, you know, if they have cerebral palsy or seizure disorder or autism or a diagnosis of intellectual disability. It gets a little bit more challenging when they're an individual that fits into the category of other intellectual disability. So that can take some time, sometimes going back and forth with the care coordinator, them working with the family to get the diagnostic materials that they need to show that they meet that criteria. Because essentially what we do is we determine that they have a qualifying diagnosis that meets the regulations, and we're essentially establishing DD eligibility again. We're looking at those three areas to make sure that they continue to experience a substantial functional limitation. If they're going to qualify under other ID, we have to ensure that they have cognitive disabilities that are at the same level as someone that we would serve under ID. So there's a lot of, you know, sort of medical documentation review that we do. And then once we have a complete application, then they get put on the list to have an assessment. So for individuals over the age of 3, we would do an ICAP. And we have a regulatory requirement that within 30 days of receiving a complete application, we have to make a determination. So we're trying to get that assessment done quickly. And for that assessment, we try to see the individual, and, you know, pre-COVID, that was in person whenever possible, but we do a lot of Zoom and that sort of thing as well, especially for people that live in more rural areas. And then we have to talk to 3 people who know the person very well, who can speak to their daily functioning. And we look at, you know, motor skills, social communicational skills, personal living, community living, and then any behavioral needs that they have. we sort of put all that together, all that information together, and we score them. And there is a score that they have to fall below for their age in years and months in order to be determined to have a level of care that meets our requirements. So that might be too much information, but is that what you were looking for, Lisa?
Sorry about the road noise.
Oh,
no, that was perfect. And then can you speak to what are those qualifying diagnoses, and then also what the ICAP stands for?
Oh yeah, sorry. So the ICAP stands for the Inventory for Client and Agency Planning. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's simply to determine what a person's functional abilities are. And sorry, the other question, oh, what are the qualifying diagnoses? So there's cerebral palsy, seizure disorder, autism, intellectual disability, and other intellectual disability. So that's what I was saying, for the other intellectual disability, they have to have a cognitive disability that would be at the same level as someone who would qualify under intellectual disability. So, you know, when you think about the DD eligibility criteria, it's the same. They would have to, you know, fall 2 or more standard deviations below the mean. So they'd have to have an IQ lower than 70, or, you know, other testing that can get us to that, you know, point in terms of determining that. So
as far as like the syndromes, like Down syndrome, the fetal alcohol syndrome, can you speak to just the syndromes?
Yeah, so there are a number of diagnoses that could fall under other ID, and Lisa, you gave a couple of examples. Other ones, oh gosh, you're gonna put me on the spot here. Rett syndrome is one. We have a whole list of ones, and every time we get a new one, we have to vet it. Anytime someone, you know, we get an application where a person's going to fall under other ID, we do a committee review. So the person that takes the application reviews all the documentation that we got, and like I said, they're essentially looking at the substantial functional limitation. They then present it to a committee, and we determine whether or not we can serve that person under other ID. Oh, what was the other thing I was going to say about that? Oh, we do, essentially, we're trying to find a way to fit them on the program, right? So that's our first priority. Do we have something here that's workable to where we could serve them on the program if it's going to be under other ID? And then sometimes we have options, like sometimes we'll have someone who has a diagnosis of Down syndrome and intellectual disability. So in that case, we try to serve them under what makes the most sense. So if we can meet all the criteria for Down syndrome, other ID, we'll serve them under that because the intellectual disability is a result of the Down syndrome. So we try to have the most accurate diagnosis. But let's say we had someone where, you know, it was clear they had Down syndrome, but they didn't have that diagnosis, but they had a diagnosis of intellectual disability. We just put them under intellectual disability. We wouldn't make them go through more hoops to get on the program. Oh, the IAT. So the history for IAT, if anyone is interested, maybe you're not, maybe it's just me, but so we used to serve a lot of kids actually under IAT, but really what they were getting was ABA services. So ABA services sort of fit that criteria. But then the Division of Behavioral Health created their autism services program. And so that's what Dan was talking about, that is an option for anyone that's under the age of 21. They can't get what's called IAT, but they can get what essentially historically they would have gotten, which is ABA, under autism services through the Division of Behavioral Health. So I have had a couple of families where maybe they don't meet our criteria, but they do have autism. And what a great resource, you know, if they can get ABA services for their kiddo, whether they're on the wait list or not, that should be something that, you know, is explored as an option. So definitely if you have people like you're talking about kind of figuring out what services they could utilize in the meantime, that's a great resource. If they have a definitive diagnosis of autism of autism, then they can access those autism services.
So we have the alphabet soup book, our different phases here for the different lunch and learns. Like Lisa was saying, it goes all the way back to the first one, the developmental disability determination application. Lots of acronyms in this one, getting getting going in the process. And then for the DDRR, there's not a whole lot of new here. A lot of it comes down to those more specific questions for each family, for each individual. So on this side, we're talking less like medical record, resources and whatnot, and more specific to the applicant and their home life, the community life. And then if we hear anything that comes up in that talk that maybe we didn't pick up on before, we can help more in this phase. Social Security and the Division of Public Assistance. We have acronyms for that process. And then we have this last one, they're bringing it all together here. New acronyms here as well. And then like Lisa was saying, we can get this sent out to people to have this. And the final copy has some additional pages in there so you can take some notes and add anything that may come up that maybe wasn't covered here, or even to just have some note space.
This is Heather. Dan, I was going to say, you guys actually taught me a new acronym. When I started doing all the DDRRs, I was like, what is Lisa saying when she's saying, was it DSO, danger to self and others? I was like, what is this acronym? I had to really think for a second. So you guys are teaching me as well.
Peer support.
I think with these acronym books, they can be chapter books. Well, there are no questions in the chat box. I think we can wrap this up nicely and look at the pretty bow that we have on our very last Lunch and Learn for our fiscal year. I just want to let everyone know, especially the right off of Northern Lights, sorry, especially for the DDRC navigators. You guys have been absolutely awesome with your presentations over this fiscal year. So a big shout out to each and every one of you. And those that attend our DDRC and our Lunch and Learns, we really appreciate that support. And spreading the news about our Lunch and Learn also helps. We are hopeful that one of these days that we will be actually having our Lunch and Learns in person. One of the great things is coming together and being there in person, but we also have lunch for everyone. We're all foodies here, so that's one of the best things. But even when we do have the opportunity to come back in person for our Lunch and Learns, we still provide it virtually. So those that aren't able to come actually to the Stone Soup Group office building, they can attend through Zoom. So I just want to let everyone know a big thank you. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Lisa, before we go, can I just give a plug real quick? I'm not sure how many of you know about the Family Echo that the Center for Human Development does. To raise a hand, do you know about that? I know I see some of you on there. As you have new families come through your door and you're working with them, if you could encourage them to sign up for that. We're really trying to get as many, there's a lot of providers, and which is great, you know, that are on the call, but really the goal is to get as many family members as we can to get them connected with resources and each other so they can provide support to one another. So I just wanted to give a plug for that. You can go just search UAA CHD and then go to their Echo section and you can see the link there. So if you share that with family members, if they're looking for support and you think it'd be something to be interested in, I'd appreciate it greatly. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Heather. And actually, Roberta, one of our own DDRC navigators, presented the other day. So yeah, we will definitely promote that. Any extra support that we can give to individuals and families is just what they need. Well, on that note, again, thank you for coming to our Lunch and Learn. For those of you that haven't had lunch yet, go have lunch because we learned a lot. So, thank you all. Take care.